our feet with wealth, knowledge, and understanding. Give us health and strength so that we can do our jobs from day to day. Take our family, take our friends, take the country in charge. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Members, let me welcome each and every one of you. We have here the usual suspects that are present at every meeting. Let me thank you, even though few in numbers. The work of the committee shall continue. Let me also thank you that even though the Parliament has gone on summer break, that we saw it fit to continue the people's work and the committee's work. This will be the last meeting, as we go into the summer break. So I wish each and every one a productive meeting and that we can get through this within the specified time. All right. Apologies for absence. So far, I have an apology from Mrs. Juliet Holness, Ms. Tamika Davis, Mr. Dwight Sibley's, and the Honorable Lester Henry. Are there any other? None? Yeah, I did say. All right. We move on to item 5, which is a confirmation of minutes. Can I take the minutes as being read? If so, are there any corrections? None? Okay. All right. So can we confirm the minutes as presented to us?
So moved, Chair.
Thank you very much. And seconded by Member Jackson. Are there any matters arising from the minutes?
Just a check. I saw the responses from the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. May I just indicate I have a few, having gone through the minutes too, and what they supply, I have some arising questions from those, but I'll raise them when next we convene.
Okay, all right. Because, well, in the meantime, what I would suggest, if there are any additional information coming out of what they have supplied, right, that you forward that to the clerk, yeah, right, so that she can seek those clarifications, right, during the summer break, so that when we come back, at least we will have something to deliberate on. All right?
Because they're really clarifying questions, so it wouldn't be even appropriate to raise them in the meeting here. So I'll just forward them to.
Yeah. All right, so, and I would say that for all members, with the response that was given by the Ministry of Industry. Yeah, if there are any additional, if the response is not as clear as you want it, right, then there's no problem in forwarding some additional questions or clarifications to the clerk, that she will then get that done. All right?
In addition to that, Chair, Ms. Bailey is out her seat. But did we get the terms of reference for the task force dealing with the cannabis that we had asked for in the last meeting?
Well, if it is not in I have not gone through the information myself as yet.
I have not seen it. And
so if it is not, then I will ask her to. It is here, terms of reference.
Oh, okay.
It was sent. All right.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So I'll ask her to yeah. All right. So. Yes. It's the issue of the issue of the response from Ministry of Industry. Members were saying there are some follow-up questions that they would like, so I've asked them to just forward them directly to you, so that can be sought during the Parliament summer break or the committee's summer break. And Member Jackson was inquiring about the term of reference which was asked of the task force, if it was submitted. So probably to just look through the, yeah. All right, but there are hard copies here. All right, so that will be given to you during the period. All right, members, before we invite in the ministry, there's a final document that should have been sent to us, but was sent to another clerk. So if you don't mind, I'll give the members a few minutes to just go through this document, which is from the Ministry of Education, and then invite the ministry in. It's here. All right, can you invite in the ministry phone, please? Good morning. Let me welcome you to the sitting of the PAAC. I see we have Mr. Robinson, which is from Office of the Prime Minister, and our Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education. Mr. Robinson, I gather that you'll be leading.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so I'll allow you to introduce the members of the team, and then Permanent Secretary can do the same, and give you an opportunity to make opening remarks, and then we will go into questioning.
All right. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members, P.S. McLean, colleagues. Let me first of all apologize for the unavoidable absence of our Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Audrey Sewell. She would have loved to be here. Unfortunately, she's not. The OPM Heart NSTA Trust team includes the following officers. Yours truly, Wayne Robertson, Chief Technical Director in the Office of the Prime Minister. Mr. Tafari Buri, Principal Finance Officer from the OPM. Mrs. Sharika Hemmings Allison, our Principal Director in the Office of the Prime Minister, and Mr. Sean Hilton, Development Analyst, also in the Office of the Prime Minister. The Heart NSTA Trust team is comprised of the following: Mrs. Novelet Denton Prince, to my immediate left, is the Acting Managing Director. Mr. Kevin Mullins is the Senior Director for the Heart Trust Fund. Miss Desireen Pearson is Corporate Counsel, and Mr. William Malava is the Director for Public Procurement. Mr. Chairman, thanks for inviting us. We look forward to answering the varying questions which you will be posing to us this morning. Thank you. You did say I have the liberty of making opening remarks. I don't know if you want me to proceed.
Well,
or
allow the PS to just introduce our team, and then you can go into your opening remarks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Good morning to you, sir, and good morning to the members of the PAAC. I have with me here this morning Mrs. Sonia Banton, our Principal Financial Officer, Mrs. Philippa Grant-Smith, who is responsible for special projects, and Dr. Tamika Benjamin, who is responsible for specifically for the integration of the grades 12 and 13 program, of which the Center of Occupational Studies Associate Degree is now a part of that program.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the Office of the Prime Minister prides itself in raising the bar in respect of strict adherence to legislation and establish policies and procedures governing the operations of the public sector. The importance of strict conformity to the rules is frequently communicated, Mr. Chairman, to our portfolio entities and also our internal divisions and units. And I can just use an example. Just recently on July 1 at our quarterly performance review meeting with the agencies, we stressed the importance of strict adherence, of ensuring good corporate governance, ensuring that we are adhering to the Public Procurement Act, the Public Bodies Management Accountability Act, the FAA Act, and a plethora of other rules which govern our work. We have in place, Mr. Chairman, a robust monitoring framework which enables us to generate data and reports on the performance of our internal divisions and units at the OPM in general, and data on corporate governance in particular. And this is mostly because of the operations of our agencies. You can understand that they are governed by the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act, for example. We have to ensure that the annual reports and audited financial statements are submitted in accordance with the Act and other applicable rules. As a ministry, and let me emphasize, we are fervent in our belief that we are accountable to the people of Jamaica, and we take that very seriously. We must prudently manage public funds. We're fully seized of this, Mr. Chairman, particularly during this very difficult period of the pandemic, which has resulted in the paucity of funds available to ministries, departments, and agencies. And simply put, Mr. Chairman, we have to do more with less. The OPM constantly strives to introduce new systems while simultaneously improving existing systems. And we are currently, just an example, Mr. Chairman, we are currently developing a risk management framework which includes an internal operational policy and a risk management plan, which is a relatively new area for us and many other entities. This will allow us to manage our risk and to put mitigating strategies in place. The Heart NSTA Trust has an enviable track record of performance and is considered by many to be best practice within the Caribbean with respect to human capital development. They have capacitated countless Jamaicans so that they are equipped with critical skills and competencies to either start their own businesses or secure employment in the public and private sectors. The agency has sound systems and procedures in-house to ensure operational efficiency and compliance with GOJ rules. Notwithstanding, Mr. Chairman, we acknowledge that there are weaknesses. And I'll just, in closing, share just some examples of the systems that the Heart NSTA Trust would have implemented. For example, for tenders between 1.5 million and 29.99 million, final approvals are granted by the managing director of the Heart NSTA Trust, and only bids priced at 30 million and above require board approval. That's just an example. There's a well-established board in place, Mr. Chairman, with the supporting committees, and these actions that we have taken at the OPM are in keeping with the corporate governance guidelines. And some of these committees includes, if not all, the Corporate Governance Committee, Finance, Projects and Programs, ICT, Audit, and stakeholder interface. Importantly and notably, Mr. Chairman, board members are required to declare conflicts of interest at the start of each meeting. And if there is any conflict, that member must recuse him or herself when that particular agenda item in question is being discussed. So, Mr. Chairman, we recognize the plethora of strengths, but we also recognize that there are areas for improvement. And we look forward to the questions that you will be posing to us this morning. Thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, so Chairman and members, we were asked to provide information specifically on the Center of Occupational Studies. And so before you is the report which was submitted accordingly. And just to give a brief overview, the Center of Occupational Studies was established in July 2016, and this was established as a part of the programs that are being funded through the Career Advancement Program, which commenced in 2011. We recognized at the time that the Career Advancement Program was completing and certifying a number of students at the level 1 and level 2 in some cases of the HART NCT VET framework. And so these students would now needed to be provided with additional qualification for them to move into the world of work or to move into higher level education. And so at the time, we commenced the process of doing a mapping on the tertiary framework so that the tertiary institutions, our community colleges and our teachers' colleges and universities too, could offer the occupational associate degree. So it was against that background that the occupational associate degree was developed alongside the framework that is used at the tertiary level, which is really a credit system and not a level system as is used in the National Vocational Qualification Framework. And so we commenced the funding of students who would have gotten their level 1 and level 2 certification for them to move into the occupational associate degree. Now, this occupational associate degree would allow for these students to have at least completed 2 years of tertiary education, and hence would now just need to move into the other program, the other programmatic area for another 2 years to complete a full degree. So the occupational degree was seen as a means through which we could increase the percentage of our students who are moving into the tertiary level and hence have a greater throughput as it relates to persons who are qualified for the world of work or to move into higher education. So the program is relatively new. We would have had significant setback in the 2019-2020 school year based on the onset of COVID, but we have sought to refine the systems, and we are in the process of having this program fully integrated as a part of the ministry's K-13 strategy, which speaks to our students leaving at the level of an associate degree at the grade 13 level. Thank you, Chairman.
Members, go ahead, Member Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of guidance here, Chair. We will start with the last comment by the PS and then move over to. Okay, yes. I'll start there. Madam PS, morning to all our guests here this morning. The document here was just come to our hands this morning. I understand there was some internal misdirection. It went to another committee, so the committee members only have the benefit of it while we sat here a few minutes ago. So I just say that I have not gotten the benefit to fully digest. So I made a quick perusal of the document. And on page 2, or page 1, because the first one is the cover, right? Page 1 of the document, Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, that page. I try to understand it as best I can. The Center for Occupational Studies, COS, under the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, was established in July 2016. The Center of Occupational Studies is tasked with providing a straightforward and disciplined approach to the establishment of occupational associate degrees in Jamaica. So that is its mandate, I gather, in the broadest of sense. Then the operational components would flow from that. Is the COS, is it a policy-making entity? Is it a program delivery entity? Could you just give some clarity to that in terms of its functional role?
Okay, so, member, it's not a policy-making entity. It was established as a project comprising a small team that was responsible or is responsible for the coordinating, monitoring, and guidance of the development of the curriculum for various occupational degree areas in collaboration with the tertiary institutions.
Okay, fine, because why I ask that question is to give clarity to some other questions I have. So it came into being in 2016, okay? That's when it came into being. And then I see, what is the budget for COS? The first subsequent budget year, 2017-2018, it has a budget of $325,350,000. And it goes down. The following year, 400 million, then 353, and 196 in the current, rather, the last year, 2021. These are substantial sums.
Yes, sir.
From what I'm gathering from what you just said, Madam PS, this body was constructed, was put together to coordinate and develop and coordinate, specifically to begin with associate degree programs. Now, help me here. Associate degree programs are already being provided through some of our public institutions, namely community colleges. So there is a template for associate degree programs, I would presume, in our educational architecture. Granted, every associate degree program and every degree program would have their own particularities, right? Depending on the discipline and what is entailed in it. But in terms of the general construct, that would have been established because these degrees are not new to Jamaica, not new to the public educational structure. You meaning the Ministry of Education, wants to create an associate degree program aligned to, or as the document further said, aligned through the national qualification framework. So you have a particular training program, skills training program in place, and you want to elevate it to another level. As it said, provide supervised personnel skilled in what is knowledge base and experience, etc., etc. That's in the narrative that,
yes,
that is set out. And to develop that and institute it. Right? That is what I gather the coordinating and organizing function would be. On the surface of it, PS, for an entity just being established in 2016 and to come into being in 2016 through to 2017, it has an operating budget provision of $325 million. Now, breakdown of it, as I said, I didn't get the chance because of the fact that it just came to us. But if you could help us in terms of the attachment, in terms of the breakdown for that $325 million, but if you could give us the benefit of what the $325 million in deliverables, right? We have a degree program, is it we pay the tuition for all of the students who are enrolled in this associate degree program for that particular year, how many students were enrolled, if it is so to provide tuition support, etc. If you could just give us a sense of what deliverables. I'm more concerned about what we get in return for our budgetary allocation, which is one of the remit of our committee.
Okay, Chairman. So, sir, if I may just explain a little about the establishment of the associate degrees. The tertiary system in Jamaica operates on a credit basis. So for each program, you have a number of credits that you would attain that go towards your GPA. The National Vocational Qualification Framework that, of course, would have been developed through the NCTVET and HART speaks to a level system. So they currently have a level system. So they have a level 1 to 8 as a part of their framework. And most of the students do level 1, level 2, and of course that is increasing. Now, we recognize a challenge where those students who have completed level 2, let's say in construction, in Block Lane, for example, they have a difficulty getting into a Portmore Community College to continue a construction management degree program because there was nothing in place to see how the level system matches with the credit system. And so the team at the tertiary level had to go through a very detailed mapping exercise to determine the number of credits that the programs that are offered using the level system as against those that are offered at the tertiary level. And so that was where the associate degree really bridged that gap, because it was developed on, of course, the educational principles and construct, and there was a credit assignment to each of the courses, so that at the end of the associate degree, each student would be awarded 60 credits, and these credits would now qualify them to move into the full degree program to complete within another 2 years. This never existed in Jamaica before, sir. And so
the 60 credit is for what degree?
The 60 credits would be the associate degree.
Associate degree.
Right.
Okay.
So this never existed before. And so based on research that was done and what's happening in other countries, that's how the occupational associate degree was developed. The name occupational suggests that it has to do with workplace competencies. So we engage with different industries, and they assisted us in terms of the principles as well as the outcomes. And so that's really how it was established. So while it was established in July 2016, we still had to develop the programs and made sure that they were fit to be offered. And these were offered with the tertiary institutions. Now, remember, an associate degree in the community colleges, for example, will cost anywhere between $250,000 and $350,000 per student. We wanted to make sure that these students who are under the career advancement program can actually attain an occupational associate degree at no cost to, let me say, tuition, so they would not have to pay. So the ministry committed to providing the funds for the payment of this degree. And so we negotiated with the tertiary institutions, and we came to an arrangement to charge $150,000 per student per year. So it means that a student would be able to complete the associate degree for $300,000 that would be paid by the ministry. And so for the period of the program, we would have started the program with almost 2,896 students were initially enrolled. And we currently have about 1,763 of the students who are completing different areas of the program. So 1,763. So if I refer back to the I don't think you have that figure, sir, on the document, but that can be provided. So if I take you back, member, to the financial breakdown for the years, which is at the back of the report that was provided, when you go through, you would note that most of the funds that would have been paid would be tuition payment that was paid to the institutions based on the number of students that they have enrolled in this program. So the amount, the 150,000 was actually pegged to each student, although I must add that we had to ensure that we do quite a bit of coordinated training for some of the modules, and we also had to ensure that we support the capacity building as well as the development of the curriculum. So we would have ensured that those are also included in the budget, but at least 95% or so of the budget would have gone into paying the institutions for the training and certification of these students.
On that last point, PS, the budget, the expenditure statement for 2017-2018 for tuition was $71.5 million, and the budget was $325 million for that year.
Right.
That's roughly, that's less than a quarter.
Okay, so if I may explain that, member. So for 17-18, we had projected that we would have enrolled 1,500 students. But because
1,500 in 2017-2018?
That's what the projection was. But because of the newness of the program, and as we know in Jamaica, whenever something new is introduced, it takes time to settle in fully. That year we enrolled 569 students who entered the program. So we, as I had indicated earlier too, sir, the budget that funds this program is a combination of the appropriation in aid that we receive from HART, as well as an allocation that is made by the ministry as well.
No, but fine, the source of it is not the point of interest just now. What caught my eyes is the fact that we had $325 million budgeted for that year, while, as you have pointed out, from the expenditure for tuition support, which you said represents the bulk of the budget expenditure, for that year, we only had $71.5 million. In the following year, 2018-2019, we had a budget of $400,350,000. The tuition expenditure statement is 172, which is less than half. 2019-2020, the expenditure was 349. It's kind of more in alignment there for the 2019-2020. And then for 2021, it's $179 million as against 196. That is pretty much in alignment. The difference would be, I presume, administrative costs and whatever else associated. But the first 2 years,
yes, sir,
you have substantially large difference between tuition support and the budgetary allocation. Could you provide some reconciliation for that? And second related question to that aspect of it, PS, the students who are enrolled, like you said, for 2017-2018, you targeted 1,500. Take the point, it's new, get people on board, it takes some sensitization for that to happen. You only had 569 enrollment. Was that money expended in that year?
So
I don't see any, because I don't, normally we put some sort of budget adjustment for what is allocated and what was expended, but I only see budget in the documents provided.
Right. So Chairman, if the further breakout is required, then that can be provided. I was just saying a little earlier that the funds for this program would have been budgeted based on the overall allocation for the career advancement program, which is where the bulk of the funds come from. So having noted from early, let's say in 17-18, that the numbers that we had anticipated for enrollment did not realize, then those funds would have been reallocated to assist with other programs under the career advancement program, which would be the other part of CAP, or the purchasing of equipment and materials and support for the institutions.
Just to follow up on the question and your answer. Let me see if I get it clear. The approved estimate of expenditure, which is item 4 on page 2, would be the total amount of expenditure that would have been in the budgeted for the year. Would you less that 325 from that 519 in 2017-18? So you had $1.174 billion that was budgeted. You'd have less that 325 from that 1 point.
Yes,
right?
Chairman.
All right. Just going back now to the issue of what would have been disbursed for that period,
Right, yes.
for the program itself. These institutions that you have listed here as tuition payments on page, it would have been page 4, really, at the back.
Yes.
Yeah. How are these institutions paid per student?
Okay, so the ministry has an MOU with each institution, and each institution is paid $150.
50,000.
150,000 per student. That is what was committed. And of course, there would be per person per year. Of course, there would be a process in terms of when we verify the enrollment and the verification documents submitted and actually approved before the payments are made.
Now get into that part for me. How is that done? Give us the steps and when the payment would have been made.
Okay, so we mentioned earlier, sir, in terms of the coordination of the program. So the Center of Occupational Studies had about 5 officers who were responsible for working with different groups of institutions. So the institutions, the tertiary institutions, they meet on a regular basis as a body to discuss matters regarding tertiary programs, including this program. And so they would have been advised through letters as to the number of persons that are being projected for their school to enroll. Of course, the numbers would be based on their capacity. The shortage of training space before COVID would have been a major issue because of the capacity they have. So there are some institutions that had far more capacity than others. And of course, we allow this because we had the students from the career advancement program who needed to advance their training. So once we have agreed on that, there is a file that would have been signed off by the permanent secretary to say that this is the allocation and this is what each institution will enroll for the year. At about, we have the payments in tranches, and it has gotten better over time in terms of the structuring of the payments. So now we do 4 tranches. So they would have been paid the first tranche in June of the current year, and that would be paid on their new enrollment or the enrollment that they had previously. The second tranche is usually paid in September. That is to provide them with the funds so they can commence their
but the June
operational
payment will
activities.
take care of what? New enrollment?
Whether new enrollment or if there was enrollment coming from before. So if we are starting, when we started in 2016, September, when the enrollment started, those students who started in September 2016 would have received a payment in June 2017, 17, which would have been for the previous enrollment plus the projected enrollment for the new year. In September, they would be paid
So you
another.
basically get an advance on the
Right,
on the
because they have to prepare for the new school year, sir. So we actually have it in line with just how we do for the regular secondary schools. Between September and December, the enrollment is verified. And of course, we have seen where sometimes the persons will enroll and then they just do not turn up for training, so those persons are not paid for. But we verified based on full registration and commencement of the program. And then the third tranche is paid in December, depending on the number of students verified. So for example, if we had verified X number, if we had paid X number in June, which would be the first 25%, and when the verification is done, the numbers that are there are less than was actually there projected, then we would have ensured that we reduce the percentage that would be paid in December. And then the last payment would be made in April for that school year, and then the cycle commences again in June.
Right. So let's go back to 2017-18.
Yes, sir.
How many students you said enrolled in the program then?
Okay, 2017, 18. Chairman, if you could just give me a few minutes. Philip, I don't know if you can find that readily. Okay, it's right here before me. In 2017-2018, 569 students would have been enrolled, sir.
569. And in that period, how many, and it's a two-year program?
Yes, it's a 2-year program.
All right. By your records, how many completed the first year?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I have a breakdown of I have a summary in terms of the overall enrollment because it's a 3-year program, but what I do have is institution by institution. I don't have the summary breakdown per year, but for the overall program.
All right, so start with one, no? Choose one.
For the 4 years that we are looking at, we started out with 2,896 students. We have a dropout rate of 1,142, hence a retention rate of 61. So we started with 2,896.
2,896.
Right, and let me clarify dropout member. Dropout doesn't necessarily mean that the person was not certified in any area. They would have completed what we call stackable credentials. Those are smaller courses that we sought to certify persons in. So what we found is that a lot of the programs, students leave to go on construction sites to work, for example, to go on the cruise ship and other areas. And so once they have finished a particular module, then they leave with that qualification. So the institutions provided that certification in those areas. So if and when they require to come back to complete the full associate degree, then they can return to have that completed.
All right, so we started out with 2,896 students.
Right.
Just a question before you continue.
Sure.
In relation to the dropouts, you gave an explanation just now, PS. But from the numbers that you've given in terms of dropouts and the stackable credentials that you mentioned, how many of those persons from the dropouts would have had those credentials?
694.
No, so let but let me just get the numbers first, and then we
come back to
because we keep stopping the PS. So
the dropout now. We have the enrollment.
we started with 2,896.
Right, so let's not say started, Chairman. Let's say this is the overall number over the
4 years.
The 4-year period.
All right, so break it down by year. Year one.
Okay, so that was what
Which
I
would be
indicated.
569.
That's what, yes, year one would be 569. And year...
And that year one student would complete 3 years after.
No,
2
Or
years.
2 years after.
2 years after.
Okay. All right, so that's year one, 569. Year two?
Year two, we had an enrollment of 1,588. 3 and 4.
1,588. Year three?
I don't have the year 3 figures with me, Chairman, nor year 4. I would have to provide those 2 years, or if my officer could just search through to see where I have that. I don't have it as a part of the summary report that I have here.
All right, so year two would be new enrollment. Wouldn't be the rollover of this 569 into.
Right, so year 2 would be the rollover of the 569 plus the 1,000. Plus
1,000.
Of course,
given to you.
1,000. Yes, sir. Because it's a 2-year program.
All right. So, and you say in total you had 2,896.
Right.
In the 4 years.
In the 4
Yeah?
years. Yes,
But you're
yes,
not
Chairman.
able to give me the breakout of year 3 and year 4 as yet.
Right. I'll
Right.
provide that, sir.
And you said that the dropout rate over the 4 years have been.
Just
Sure.
rough calculation. The 2 years, the 1,588 in year 2, is that an enrollment amount which
Well, it's a
inclusive of the
rollover of the 569.
So the
and
difference of that
is
would be the
1,000.
additional
Yeah.
amount in
Yeah.
year.
So it's really a new applications of about
coming
1,000.
into year 1.
About 1,000 plus, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So each year you have a rollover. So the difference between, so you really have to get the breakout to see what the rollover is. But what I want to find out from the PS is that if in the 4 years you have 2,896 and you said the dropout was, by your records, would have been how much?
Right. So I had the number for dropout as 1,142, but I spoke about the stackable credentials, which is 694 persons. So they
690?
694.
Would have gotten certification or the
So
associate degree?
So they would have received what is called a stackable credential,
No.
which is...
Let me start out by asking, because this is an associate degree program. So that is how it is marketed. Huh?
Yes, sir.
All right. How many of this 2,896 would have received an associate degree?
Okay, so far we have certified 336 persons have received the full associate degree. There is another 802 that are on track for completing.
800 and how much?
802. And there is another 1,019 that is considered to be incomplete at this time, but based on the tertiary framework, they have a specified period of time within which they can complete. So they are usually kept by the institutions until they have completed all the modules within a specified period of time.
So it may be over the 2 year.
No, sir, don't quote me on this, but I think they have between 3 and 5 years to complete all the requirements for certification. So it's longer than the 2-year period. And most of these institutions, they also enroll these students into their full degree program after completion.
Yeah, but what is the ministry's assessment then of, since we have gone over 3 years, of going into a 4th year, assessment of the success of the program itself? Because if we are to refer back to a report that has been given to us on the success of certification, be it a HEART program or the CAP or the Center of Occupational Studies, has been below par in what has been assumed that we would have gotten out of it.
Okay, so Chairman, we we did a structured evaluation of the program itself. An external evaluator actually did the evaluation, and the evaluator has indicated, well, I'll just read two of the paragraphs from the executive summary, or three. So the Center of Occupational Studies was effective in achieving its 2016-2019 strategic objective to develop and expand a suite of industry-relevant occupational programs and services. Towards the end of the 2019-2020 academic year, 17 out of 22 occupational associate degree programs were fully developed and were being offered in 19 tertiary institutions. Although COS successfully developed the curricula, it was not able to meet its goal of effectively providing certification to many of the students who initially enrolled in the program. And of course, that is referenced from 2016 to date. It also speaks to the stackable credentials which were provided, and indicated that this acknowledges the various socioeconomic challenges that students are faced with. However, ensuring that they are provided with the certification before they actually consider to be drop out of the program was seen as a positive. And the final paragraph says that the Center of Occupational Studies moderately delivered on the integration of technical and vocational education and academia to provide workforce solutions and improvement of national productivity. And COS has achieved limited results in its efforts to align with global industry standards and certification. There were some specific recommendations that were also made as to how we could move forward. And as I get to them, just to say, we have actually started to implement those. The first one is to encourage stronger alignment between the high schools and the tertiary institutions, centralizing or creating a portal for record keeping, continue to develop shorter targeted training modules, and those would be especially for those students who tend to want to leave the program before it is completed, develop flexible training schedule and modality, require institutions to own the program and meet certain criteria for standardized funding, and develop more detailed fiscal accounting guidelines to manage the program. So those are the recommendations that were made by the evaluator.
So in essence, you have been meeting part of your mandate because you're able to give these other certifications, even though the program was developed as a 2-year associate degree. So you're basically making good of a bad situation.
Yeah, really. Yes, Chairman. Right? And Chairman, if I may say, when the ministry develops these programs to assist students who are out of school, for example, there is always the challenge of ensuring that you can have these who are adults by this time really consistently focusing on the program. And especially if the program is not providing meals and other amenities to assist them, it becomes very difficult for them to follow through the full program. So that would have been a part of the challenge. We took the recommendations from the evaluators, and we have now, as you have said, Member, we have now formed a partnership with the the Council of Community Colleges, and we have now handed over the programs that have been developed for them to fully coordinate the program. So the ministry having developed, we have totally disbanded the COS unit, and we have now handed over the intellectual property to the Council of Community Colleges for them to monitor the programs with the tertiary institutions. So I'll say the program had its pitfalls. We try as best as possible to certify as many of the students that we could. We have the data to show how the program has gone, and the ministry would have no more interest to have a program inside the ministry, but to hand it over to the experts for them to now move it to the next level. And of course, our minister would have given some directives in terms of the duty of care and support for our students while they go through the program, sir.
What percentage of this budget comes from HEART?
Okay, so the budget prior to, I think it may have been 2016, we received an appropriation in aid of, after 2016, or in the 2016-2017 year, an appropriation in aid of 800 million from HEART. Prior to that, it was 400 million. Then it was reduced in 2019-2020 to 500 million. And Mr. Mullins is here to correct me. And it is now at 400 million. So currently HEART is providing 400 million as contribution to the program, sir.
So basically that's 90% of this 2020-2021 financial year, because you have 551 million as approved in the expenditure.
Yes, Chair.
But at just a rough calculation, you said 569. All right, you want to ask on that line? Huh? You want me to finish? Yeah. So in this 17-18, you said 569 students would have enrolled. If they had completed the first year at 150,000, would have been about, per student would have been about 85 million. Would have been about 85. By my rough calculation here, about 50 million was disbursed for tuition. So is it safe to say that the differences from dropouts that did not complete the year?
Yes, that can be said roughly, sir, until if I'm requested or required to break out the full figure, then that could actually be provided. But it depends on when the numbers are verified in the institutions.
Which is the point I'm coming to. Because if by your breakdown, you would have made some of the payments basically at the start of the new school term.
Yes, Chairman. And one of the challenges we had with the institutions, they would have invested in infrastructure and materials for a program for an entire year. And so if a student drops out, let's say at the beginning of the second semester, we would have had to pay the 150,000 because that student there would have been cost incurred. So we really had to strike a balance with the institutions to make sure that we look at their enrollment. Once we are satisfied that the students have started and would have completed at least a term, then we would now calculate for them to receive.
And let me tell you why I'm asking so many questions on this. Because I'm of the impression that the record keeping, for one, is left wanting. That institutions would be paid for students who are actually not participating in the program. Hence, a huge outlay in your tuitions paid out and outlaying tuitions to these institutions. Because let us go to 2018-19. Western Hospitality Institute, $79 million, 414. What would qualify for a payment of that amount in that year? If this is Western Hospitality, this is on the breakdown, that page, that back page there, yes. Yes. No, well, if you look at expenditure for April 2018 to March 2019,
yes,
tuition payment, Western Hospitality Institute, $79,414,000.
okay.
So, Chairman, that would have been based on the number of students that would have been enrolled and verified within the institution.
So
Western Hospitality is one of those institutions that recruited large numbers of students from the CAP into the COS program.
So do me a favor then. If you set that at 150,000 per student, divide that 79,000.
529, Chair. 529.
No, I want divide that 79,414 into that figure.
Which of the figures, sir?
79,414,000 divided by the 150,000 per student. Even if you were to get a large amount of enrollment, and by your numbers, 2,896 students were enrolled. And even if there was a carryover payment from the first year into the second year, this would give you a figure of 592,429 students. So I'm trying to now clarify, what would a $79 million payment to Western Hospitality Institute in that period, April 2018 to March 2019, cover?
So the payment, as is stated here, sir, for Western Hospitality would be specifically for each student that is enrolled in a program. So the tuition payment would not have covered any other expenses to any of the institutions except for the tuition amount.
So this 79 million would be for tuition amount?
Per student. That would have been verified.
But again, I ask the question, if you were to divide this figure by the $150,000 per student, you get 529,000 students. And in the overall, 529 students. 529 students, sorry. Right? So so you're telling me that in year 2 alone, out of that 1,588, which you said to me, which you said to the committee, that there would have been a rollover from the year 1 into that number, that Western Hospitality enrolled half of the students for that year 2?
Just for context here, if you use year 1, when Western Hospitality would have had
95 students.
95 students.
Yes.
And if you roll that over into the second year, where they had 529, if you subtract that, that would have to be the new...
It's 400. And you're
right.
assuming that these 95
came over, and
right.
none of them fell in, in the dropout category.
Exactly. So if you were to take that 596 from that 1,588, assuming that all went into year 2, you would get your net figure for year 2 of enrollment, new enrollment. Yeah?
So Chairman, I have...
Or can you give me then, because can you give me a breakout then for the other institutions on what the enrollment were?
For the, okay, what are you asking for, sir? The Western Hospitality or for the other institutions?
Give me an enrollment for the other institutions also.
Okay, so let me start with GC Foster College. They started 2017. They started with an enrollment of 55 students. The College of Agriculture started with an enrollment of 136 students. Michael University started out with 93.
Well, again.
College of Agriculture. College of Arts, Science and Education.
Yeah.
Case.
It's 5. It's how many? Go again.
1 second, sir. 136. CMU had an enrollment of 273. Brownstown Community College, 164.
233 for CMU. Go ahead.
Brownstown Community College, 164. University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, 244.
That's UCC.
Bethlehem Moravian College.
Hold on, because we have to look for it, you know, so. Right? We're doing 2018-19. So that's the second table.
Numbers which are being given, right? Are you doing them by year?
I am actually...
I'm trying to follow this.
Yes, sir. I'm actually providing you with the enrollment numbers that we have for the period for each institution.
Yeah, but... Yes.
You're referring.
So
they want to know which period you're referring.
When you're giving the numbers.
So it varies. There are some that would have started in 2017-18.
Yes, we see that.
There are others that would have been
the 11 that started in
17-18
17-18 up to 18 in 18-19. So you'd have taken on 7 more. All right.
I believe that we probably need to get this information because it is very difficult for me to follow. Especially with this information that not all schools would have started at the same time, and I think we need to be able to digest it properly.
Yeah, agreed. All right, Member Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the questioning continues, it leads me to think and sometimes be in a state of confusion. But I'll still ask a question that I wanted to ask earlier to Madam PS. At this time of the program, and I want to go back to the GOS program.
Yes, sir.
At this time of the program, with all the money being spent, in your estimation as the head of the ministry, so to speak, are you comfortable with the turnout value for money? Would you say to us that yes, you would want to expand this program or you want to cut the program? I just want to know your views.
I am not comfortable with the outcome of the program, member. And that is why in 2020, I think it was, we commissioned the evaluation because there were some signs of inefficiency. We met with the institutions, we had discussion, they explained the challenges that they had. They assured me that for a new program, that's why they were having so many teething pains. And also the tertiary level certification or even completion is not very high. But I still felt that we needed to see higher certification rates and higher completion rates. So I, as a person responsible here now, sir, can't say that I am satisfied. We took the evaluation, we did an extensive review, and we took on the recommendations. And a part of the recommendation is to have a more structured unit, which is, of course, the Council of Community Colleges now that the programs have been developed. So the occupational degrees have been developed, they have been approved based on industry standards. and are there now for them to run more than one cycles. We thought that the CCCJ could now do a better job in terms of the coordination and the monitoring to ensure that the standards are maintained and the students are certified. Also, the major challenge is really to get the students to attend each day and to get them to stay in the program for the entire period. Many of the students that this program attracts are students who are trying to better or to seek an opportunity to improve their lives. So once they hear about a job opportunity, then they are going to leave the program. Or once there's an opportunity that is better than they being in the classroom trying to develop the competencies that are required, then they are going to leave. And so the implementation of smaller modules of what we call stackable credentials that are done within a 1 month, 2 months, and they get the industry designation would have allowed for us now to move forward in ensuring that they can be provided with those shorter certification, and if and when they choose to complete the occupational degree, they can do so. Another thing that we did, that we are doing now actually, is to have the high schools working alongside the tertiary institutions. So we are allowing our high schools to at least establish their grade 12 and 13, and they develop a relationship with the community college or the tertiary institution. So let me say Portmore, a community college, for example, would have a relationship with a Bridgeport and a Waterford and a Ascot and so on. And those students who are doing the grade 12 and 13 program in school will also be exposed to some of the preliminary areas that Portmore Community College is offering, so that once they have completed the grade 13 at the high school, they can move now into completing their degree at the community college or at the teacher's college. So we are trying to see how there can be an alignment from the high school. We find that students, the dropout rate for our students at the secondary level is about 20%. The dropout rate for this program, based on what I would have indicated earlier, well, the retention rate is just 61%. So we see that if the students remain at the secondary level and complete the grade 12 and 13, aligning to the community colleges, then of course we perhaps will be able to have more students completing and moving on to do their degree.
Madam PS, we do understand that this program mainly geared towards the high school dropouts or persons who have left high school. And so we understand that when you get to that stage of life, you are at that stage where you now have to fend for yourself, as Jamaican would say. And so we will understand why is it that I would enroll in the program, halfway through the program I get a job offering and I say I have to leave the program because I still have to feed myself and maybe have a youth, as some people would say, to feed. It's a job offering. But I've said it to you before at some other meetings before, where I'm saying, why is it that these programs, because in any business, Mr. Chairman, you have to have a marketing arm. You don't have to be a large, but a marketing arm to incentivize the program somewhat by saying to the youngsters that on completion, depending on your level, because not everyone will graduate at the same level, whether say attain the same credit or whatever the marks are, but to say to them that, okay, we will, or this department will make sure that we put you in a job placement, so to speak, because just as how they will go out there seeking a job, I think that if we want the program to work best is for us to have that small unit that will now be speaking to private sector to say that at the end of September, at the end of January, we will have a cohort of 50 or 70 or 100 youngsters who have their discipline in these various areas. We would like you to liaison with us for us to give you persons for that placement. And so it will at least encourage youngsters, but many of complaints, Mr. Chairman, are that, boy, I finish a course, and I sit down in my yard and do nothing. So it's just for me to say to you again, Madam Pierce, and your team, that you may want to look at how you incentivize the situation. And it's not a monetary thing. It's really a job placement that all of them seek. And that's why they go back trying to better themselves.
Yes, member, and I take that once more. The High Trust that's here, they are the ones who have facilitated quite a bit of the job placement, and they do track this. If we disaggregate the numbers further, we would see that almost all the students who were trained in the business processing outsourcing were employed because the jobs were actually available before they were trained. The courses were shorter, they got their certification, and they went right into a job. Unfortunately, some of the other areas, because the industry is just so fickle these days, before they could have been placed, then there were issues. But member, we will just continue to work with heart in terms of the linkage with industry and the placement of these students. And with the partnership with the PBCJ now, it will free up at least the central ministry to be able to support that linkage with industry a little more so the students can be placed. So I agree, sir.
It just come back to mind, Madam Pierce, that maybe about 3 years ago I suggested this matter to you, and I'm saying it again. There's a niche market out there for pharmaceutical technicians. And I'm saying it again. So often I'll get comments from pharmacists, people who own pharmacy, to say that why is it that the government cannot implement a program that will train, and they, the pharmacists, will help to write the program if needs be. It's just a case of dialogue to take place, because they in turn have to employ people who knows nothing about drugs, but yet they train them over a period of time while on the job training.
So you get them in trouble by saying that.
I mean, legal.
They ought to be licensed. So.
All right, so once again, I'm imploring of you, Madam Pierce, see how best you can look into that matter, and I would be appreciative and elated one day to see that program come to fruition.
Okay, Chairman. Okay, member.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Pierce, in addition to the information that will be provided in relation to the enrollment figures per entity, I would also request the figures as it relates to the enrollment targets for each year and for each institution as well, because I think that would also help to inform us of the budget and the success rate. You mentioned earlier what happens when there is a dropout and the funding that is provided, but I am seeking further clarity, because based on what was said, if someone should drop out before the end of the program, they would have been able to receive some stackable credentials, most of them, based on the numbers. But those programs are shorter, so 1-2 month programs. Based on the figure that is allocated per person, the 150,000, it would mean, therefore, that if they drop out at intervals, not all monies would have gone into printing, or printing of materials per se. So what happens to any funds that would be remaining then from materials that were not printed for that period? What happens to those funds? Do they come back to the ministry? Because if a student drops out, doesn't utilize the full year of printing materials, that fund, there should be funding remaining, to my mind. So my clarity is to find, I would love to get further information as to what happens to those funds. In addition to that, my final question Were any of the architects of the COS program in any way beneficiaries of funding under that program? And are you aware of any conflict of interest in relation to that?
Well, let me answer the last question first, member. The payments that are made based on number of students, and I have to depend on the officers that are so engaged to do the verification, and the registers and so on would be provided as evidence. Outside of the tuition payments, there would be no person who would have directly benefited from funding. I will say, however, that this program within itself was implemented in collaboration with the Joint Committee on Tertiary Education, which is really the group of tertiary institutions that form themselves into a committee. And the committee had requested of the ministry, through agreement with the institutions, for 20% of the payment to be paid to the JCTE. And the ministry facilitated that payment up to, I would say, up to the 2019-2020 financial year. We are no longer doing so. As it relates to a conflict of interest, I have not seen any conflict of interest in terms of the payments that we would have made, or even in terms of the relationship that we had with the tertiary institutions. In terms of the second question, the first question, member, it's when funds are paid to a tertiary institution, or any institution for that matter, the funds do not go directly to support one student. So for example, if you are paying your electricity bill, the bill is paid for, let's say, 20 or 30 students who sit in a classroom. If you are outfitting a carpentry lab, for example, then the equipment would have to be bought all together. If you are purchasing computers for the students to use, it would be the same thing. So it's very difficult, member, to actually say that a student who has completed a stackable credential and has dropped out of the program, that you could identify that 50% of the 150,000 would have been left. Because what the institutions do, they use this as their operational costs to run their operations. And so you will not find that the 150,000 that is provided is going to each institution and can be calculated for the entire period of the training program.
But PS, there is a line item here speaking to operational expenses separate and apart from tuition. So I'm now more muddled because... So
those operational expenses would be for the central ministry and not for the institution.
But you mentioned earlier that the 150,000 was for tuition only.
Right, and it goes to the school, to the tertiary institutions.
So why would they use that tuition money for operation?
But that's what the tuition amount is provided for, to take care of their operational expenses.
For the institutions.
For the institutions.
No, please. Let me have a clarification with that question. Next. In the expenditure statement here, in fact, it is after the initial questions and I get a chance to look more carefully, I see some operational expenses. Well, specifically operational expenses, COS accommodation, marketing, capacity building, trainings, right? Now, these are expenses for Center for Occupational Studies, because it's one sum that body would have expended or is expending separate and apart from each of the institutions that engage the students, for which the 150,000 is paid each.
Yes, sir.
So I think, member Hamilton's question, which I'm interested in, is these put them separate, call them separate expenditure for the time being. those are paid to the bodies for those activities, separate and apart from the schools.
Right, yes, sir.
So like accommodation, for example, what accommodation is that?
So accommodation would be, for example, hotel accommodation for an officer that is, let's say supervising Sam Sharp and Monique Teachers College and stretching it a little, Church Teachers College. Accommodation also when they are writing the curriculum and they have to stay over.
Okay.
So, or if the officer from Montego Bay has to come into Kingston for meetings and other operational activities.
That is understandable. No, like for example, did a
look at the year
balloon
over
further
year,
down? Yes.
The figure has increased.
Because
basically, and then it falls from 4.8 in the 2019-2020 to 6.25. So that means you don't have nobody not traveling in 2020-2021?
No, sir, because we have Microsoft Teams to have virtual meetings, and because of the COVID protocols, we would have reduced significantly in 2021.
Okay. So like for example now, like I saw, and I'm looking at capacity building in 2018-2019, there was an expenditure of just under $15 million for capacity building trainings. 17.4, thank you. 17.4 in 2018-2019. And that is up from the 11.4 the year before. And 51 in 2019. What does those capacity building expenditure?
Okay, so member, under the overall design of the program, there are some training sessions that are held cooperatively, for want of a better word, where the students come together, because I had indicated at the beginning that the true cost of an associate degree is about $350,000 per year. The ministry could not afford that $350,000. And so in collaboration with the tertiary institutions, we decided that there are some training programs that we will offer collectively for the students. And effectively, this is where most of the stackable credentials do come from. So the ministry would have developed a training plan for the year to support the occupational associate degree in different areas, and the students would have been grouped in different areas to do specific components of the program.
So on that note, though, just for clarification, Pierce, I'm gathering that those training, is it centrally organized and executed, or is it designed and executed by each institution?
It is centrally organized and executed by the small team that we had responsible for the program, sir, centrally.
But all of this add up, might end up by the time you finish it might come back to the 300,000.
Yeah, but is that small team a ministry team?
It's a ministry team.
So the ministry then, you're saying, would be responsible for the capacity building, training expenses.
Yes.
So this is coming from the ministry.
Right. So the ministry would have done the procurement and organized where the training would take place. And
so what institutions then would deliver this kind of training?
Yes.
So we would have secured experts in the different fields, and they would have been engaged to do the different training. So let's say, for example, it is training specific to electronics, then someone who is an expert in the industry who are supporting those students in those areas would have been utilized. So those persons would be engaged through the central ministry and deployed to wherever the site where the training is taking place.
So when you mention these experts, so they work in conjunction with the institutions? That's the site you refer to?
Right. So what we would do, Member Hamilton, is that the students would register for the different programs that we have on the training plan based on their progress in the modules for the occupational degree, and they would go to these sites as a group, as a full group, at a certain point during the year for a 2, 3, sometimes 5 days where they would receive this, let me call it collective training.
So bear with me, PS. You mentioned that the ministry could not afford the $350,000 per student for the associate's degree program, and so it was $150,000 per student instead. But then there is this add-on now for capacity building training that is done separately, but is just as or more expensive than what was
which would be interested to find out, Madam PS, if these other add-ons, when calculating it to the student population,
the aggregate, yeah,
would it come back to the same cost, or are there really any savings? Because it is a subsidized program by the taxpayers, yes, and we know that it's really a remedial program to capture those who basically left school without anything and get them into a certification program. But are you really getting value for money from all these add-ons? What is being expended compared to with that report that you have gotten? Because you are actually not certifying. You said 60%, but that's 60% in your original target for a 2-year program. That 60%, that is not in the 60%. You're even falling way shorter.
I agree, Chair, but in addition to that, I also wanted to find out too, what prevented then from the capacity building trainings from being incorporated? If it is that it can be an add-on, why not incorporate it in the overall COS program?
So there are two things, Chairman.
No, before you go, I just want to put an addendum to Member Hamilton's question.
Yes, sir.
About why not the capacity within the institutions, coupled with the fact, for example, HEART is a training institution established of the institutional architecture in place for training. Couldn't that supplementary training capacity be provided through ART, which is an existing institution within the ministry?
Yes, I'll say yes, member, and I will further explain that, Chairman, when we look at the figures, we actually would have saved significantly as against having the program, as against paying the $350,000 per student. And in hindsight, I would not have changed the approach that we use, because based on the certification rate from the retention rate from the institutions, we would have lost out on many of these students. The program, Chairman and members, is a new program. The occupational associate degree operates based on the industry-specific standards. And so getting industry involved is very important. When we met with the industry, one of the areas that they asked us to focus on was protocol and etiquette. And as a matter of fact, we developed that program and launched it with HEART, because HEART has been intimately involved in the occupational degree. Now, we found also that the lecturers at the tertiary level, we needed to build capacity in those lecturers for them to be able to offer the programs within their institutions, because the program was new. So we collaborated with HEART. During July and August, we had a significant number of training programs at Runaway Bay, at Ebony Park, at the Vocational Training Institute, getting the stackable credentials done and using the experts. And so we would, of course, have to make sure that we provide the accommodation and the meals and so on for the students, which would have taken up a part of the cost. Now that we have gone...
This is for the training of the lecturers?
Of the students, sir. Now that we have gone 3 years for the program, we would have built the capacity in the lecturers to be able to offer those modules. We would have developed a relationship in terms of for example, the Hotel and Lodging Association that offers the stackable credential for persons to work in the hotel industry. And we would have developed those expertise and those competencies so that now the institutions can offer the programs without us having to do a capacity building collective training to support them.
Chair, just another question in relation to the capacity building, because I would imagine that the figures that we have here for expenses would have, let me just look at the budget for the COS entirely. Would these figures be linked to enrollment targets, or would they be linked to actual enrollment? So for 17-18, it was 11.4 million. For 18-19, it was 17.3 million. And for 19-20, it's 51.2 million. This is an aggregate of $236 million. Is this in relation to actual enrolled figures, yes, or targets?
Okay, so it would have been based on the enrollment, and there would be numbers that would be assigned to each institution. So I actually brought with me the spreadsheet that actually shows the breakdown in terms of the training programs and the number of students who would have benefited from the programs and the period of time that they would have benefited, meaning the number of days, stroke number of hours.
And the dropout rate has no impact on these figures?
So the dropout rate, Member Hamilton, would not have any impact on the capacity building, because you take them and you have them in a location where you train them for, let's say, 3 days or 4 days. So they are there in the location for the 4 days, accommodation and meals are provided, and they go through the theoretical and hands-on training to develop those competencies.
So what is the per person rate then for this capacity building exercise?
Okay, so the per person rate for a 3-day program would range between $8,500 and $12,000 for a 3-day period.
That's one per year?
The programs would, yes, so the programs would be offered at different points in the year, sir, depending on which of the degree program the students are pursuing.
So there will be 3 of those 4-day exercises for each year?
So the spreadsheet that I have, I'm looking at 2019. We would have, this has about 20 sets of different programs with different numbers of students who would have participated.
So PS, bear with me now. So based on that information you just provided, between 8,500 and 12,000 per person, I would say let's use the higher rate of 12,000 per person. Over the past 3 years, there was 236 point something $million that was expended for the capacity building trainings, which would give us a figure of 19,674 students that would have benefited, but we are nowhere near that number in relation to our overall enrollment, which you gave us at 2,896. So how do we start to even appreciate these figures?
So member, again, if we try as best as possible not to double count in the figures that we have. So if you, based on the number of sessions that we would have had over the year, if we should double count, then perhaps we would get up to the 19,000, but we make sure that we are actually recording the students actually once, so they are not double counted. So outside of let's say the training that would cost $12,000, There are other follow-up activities and theoretical activities that are done during the training program as well. The difference is that these are done at the institutions and not really taking them to a specific venue. So I'm not sure, Chairman, if I would be able to just multiply the amount of money based on the
So the capacity building training, this figure is not just for that 3-day training that you make reference to. You're saying that these expenses extend to other expenses?
What I would suggest before you answer, because there are a lot of, just like before, a lot of clarification. We're guesstimating some of these not knowing their enrollment and the dropout rate each year.
Yeah, but Chair, the question in relation to the per person figure would be just general data. Speaking to how many students would have benefited from this capacity building exercise. If you're going to just divide the numbers, the raw numbers, that is what we get. More than 19,000 students. And based on what I'm hearing, one person doesn't benefit from this capacity building more than once. So it begs further clarity, it begs further information.
It does, yes.
It is quite, it can be very confusing.
What I would ask is just to have the questions ready to send to the clerk to the ministry, because there's going to be a lot of clarification that's needed.
I think it has opened up more questions than
answers we have really gotten. Hold on, Member Brown. No, yes, it was yourself, then Member Brown. Brown, okay, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Madam Pierce,
yes, sir.
I know Member Clark and Hamilton would have asked similar questions to the one that I want to ask. I've not really gotten the answer that I'm looking. Having recognized the students have a problem seeing the programs through to the end, what incentives, if any, were either given or considered to the students, to help the students? Remember that we are really trying to keep the young people productive.
Member Brown, I would say that having been awarded their associate degree has been a plus for the students. I wouldn't say there's any other incentive. We can say that the employment rate has been very, very high. At one stage, as a matter of fact, the students were actually clamoring to be provided with their associate degree because they needed it to be employed, or they were already employed and they needed the certification. So outside of that, sir, there wouldn't have been any other incentive that's provided.
But I just want to find out just one simple question on these institutions that can offer the associate degree. What are the requirements that these institutions would need to be able to offer such a program?
So we opened this to all tertiary institutions, Chairman, and we actually started the process with UCJ to ensure that those that are not accredited after they have completed the first cycle, they can go through the accreditation process. While those that are accredited, the institutions would offer the certification through them. So we have quite a few that are already accredited, and so the students would not have been disadvantaged.
So which of these in your list has not yet been accredited?
So the teachers' colleges, and no, not the teachers' colleges, the community colleges, they actually go through the CCCJ and receive their certification, but they are also intent and going forward for them to receive their own accreditation for the program. So we worked out the arrangement with the CCCJ so the students can be can be accredited, and there are no issues in terms of the certification. But we are currently facilitating those that are not accredited specifically for the program to go through. But it would not have disadvantaged those that are not from being able to provide in the certification through one of their sister institutions or the CCCJ.
So institutions, who is B&B? What is B&B?
B&B Institute is a private tertiary institution, sir.
All right. And the Trenchtown Polytechnic?
Yes, sir. That is one of our high schools that became a polytechnic institution.
All right. And Western Hospitality Institute?
Yes, sir. So Western Hospitality is one of those institutions that started under CAP in 2011
yes.
and would have continued.
But do they have the certification for this additional program, which is the tertiary
yes,
program?
sir. They have courses that are accredited that they currently offer.
Okay.
Accredited by?
The UCJ.
Oh, Member, you.
Chairman, I just wanted Member Hamilton had worked out a figure for the capacity building for 200 and something million member. But my figure is about 80 million for the 3-year period for capacity building. So it was 11 in 17-18, and 17 in 18-19, and 51 in 19-20. So that would be 80 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
Pierce, the chairman just asked about a couple of the institutions on the list, and you spoke to their certification. But one of the things...
Just 1 second, member. So
sure.
the figure in terms of the capacity building would have been 6,669. So I was a little distressed when the 19,000 was mentioned. So I just wanted to clarify that, sir. Thank you.
Noted, PS, but the 6,006 still 3 times more almost than the enrollment figures.
Yeah, yes, Chairman, but that could be explained in terms of how the programs are structured over the period. So that I would be able to provide you with the breakdown.
All right, member.
Chairman, you're, as I said, you're asking about a couple of the institutions which are relatively new, like the B&B and the Trenchtown Polytechnic and the Western Hospitality. When I look on the allocation under this program, Western Hospitality is the largest supplier under this program. Yes. And I see, as was said in the very beginning, the associate degree programs have been in the offering through our community colleges for a while now. I know of one that I was personally related to Portmore Community College from 1991, 92 until now, 30 years. And they have been before other community colleges. And they have always been struck by the challenges of enrollment, persons with support, student support. Because as Member of Parliament, all of us would have had efforts being made. You have an associate degree program that is new, and all of the established community colleges or institutions that have associate degree capacity offering existing, all of them fall below Western Hospitality Institute. That is very striking, that all the existing traditional tertiary, associate degree offering institutions lag way behind. For example, look at 2019-2020, 64 million in tuition support there. as against many of the others like Knox Community College, Brownstone Community College, Bethlehem Excelsior is like 1/10. In use the case of Bethlehem Moravian, and it can go down the list. It strikes the eye, this big difference. And that leads me to another question. Who was in charge of COS? Who was the principal officer driving that program? You said it was made up of a committee of persons in the ministry. In COS, the acronym for Center for Occupational Studies. How many persons made up that group?
Okay, so
and who
member, the first clarification, we really did not prevent the institutions from recruiting the number of students for the program. As we would have indicated earlier, for 17-18 and 18-19, we were even below the numbers that we projected. So we discussed with the institutions, we asked them to do the recruitment, and based on the number of students that they recruit, then we would have ensured that the budget is provided accordingly. It could be perhaps that Western Hospitality has a lot of capacity for the hospitality programs, and they are on the hospitality belt. And so they may have been able to recruit more persons than the other institutions. But we really did not prevent the institutions from recruiting more students.
I'll come back to that when the other question is answered, because as you said about the belt, I look particularly in those training institutions in the hospitality corridor.
No, but with all due respect, though, member, because I have a little challenge with that answer, Madam PS. And the reason being is that if you're budgeting, the hospitality program would not have fallen, most likely in instances, wouldn't have taken the 2 years in paying the $150,000 per year. So it might not, that student may not live out the full year, but able to get a certification in hospitality. Am I right or wrong?
The program is a 2-year. The associate degree is a 2-year program.
So you are saying to me that all these students here that enroll with Western Hospitality Institute completed a 2-year program?
No, sir, that's really not what I actually said. What I'm saying, the question I was responding to is the amount of funds that would have been paid.
No, yes, and it comes right back down to the funds, because if you have expended in year 1, 2017-18, 14.28 million, year 2, 2018-19, 79.414 million, in year 3, 2019-2020, 64.813 million, in year 4, 2020-21, I don't know if you have expended this money already, but 31.525 million is budgeted here for that expenditure. Now, this is the same Western Hospitality, if my memory serves me well, that was with the CAP program with CMU, which in that time did not deliver half of what they said they were going to deliver.
No,
this,
Chairman.
What?
For Western Hospitality,
yes,
for CAP?
Yes.
No, Chairman. That's
the same Western Hospitality that ran the CAP program that we had an issue with, which did not have the rate of certification that was expected, but monies were expended. So my question to you is, are these expenditures, have the ministry satisfied themselves that these students that you are paying for, that's why I asked the question earlier, you know, are your recording functions up to scratch, that you are not paying for students who have already also dropped out of the program? Are you certain that that is not happening?
Well, Chairman, as I was explaining, sir, that the dropout, the verification of the figures would usually be done between September and December. and it's during that period that we determine whether we pay for the students who would have actually been on the register and would have marked present.
All right, so you say you make up, the term starts when?
Usually in September.
In September. The payment in June, because you say you make a payment on assumption of an enrollment.
Right,
eh?
yes.
How much of that 150 do you pay out in June?
Is what, 25%?
That would be based on the targets then, Chair.
Right, so it's based on a percentage, sir. It's I think it is 25% that is paid in June.
In June?
And another 25%.
And that is an assumption.
Right, but
that
then
that 529 in year 2018, 2019, that Western Hospitality said that you have paid them the $79 million for. That would be on the assumption 25% of that 529 enrollment that they would have told you would have been registered.
But once the register is verified, then if the amount that was paid for them to start up in June would have suggested that they would have been paid more than what they have on their books, then we would have paid a lesser amount for the next two tranches.
Are you satisfied in the functions of those officers who are verifying that you are actually not paying out more than you are actually getting in students completing the program?
Well, Chairman, I would not have physically gone to the institutions to check to make sure, but I would have done a scan of the registers and the verification process to make sure that we are not paying more than what we are actually getting.
But
Chairman, I have to just correct, sir. In terms of CAP, Western Hospitality has the highest certification rate, and they have been consistent in terms of the number of students that they have enrolled and completed for the general CAP program.
I'll be asking you for that information in our follow-up too.
And those students are the ones, as we indicated, who would have moved now to the occupational associate degree. So they would have had a larger number than other institutions to move into the occupational associate degree.
So,
Chair, could I just, based on what was said earlier in relation to the verification between September and December for payment to be made, but what about data after December? What happens then? Do you do verifications during that period to determine whether or not the overall numbers now...
Or before each payment period?
Or before each payment period, exactly. How is it treated?
The verification is done at least twice per year. So the verification is done between September and December during that period. And after the last tranche is paid, then there is a verification and an audit that is done by the officer that is responsible. The verification is not only in terms of the numbers, it's also in terms of the progress as it relates to the program that they are currently completing.
How many officers do you have that
we had about 4 officers that were responsible for the 19 institutions, sir.
Well, let me ask you though, because in questions and answer from Hart, which is question 7, and the answer to it, is it the norm for companies that benefit or is employed by the institution to have outstanding amounts to the same institution in taxes?
On a point of order, Mr. Chairman, we are now 20 minutes to 1 o'clock, and so I would encourage that you invite the ministry to come back at the next meeting.
Because we're going to ask some follow-up questions that will be sent to the ministry.
But then you could just send them in an email.
No, well, we have, what I'm asking is here in the answers.
I know, but I'm just watching the time, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much. This is really for Hart.
Well, Chair, I think it would also be for the ministry, because I would imagine that any program that is done via institutions, there must be due diligence. So it would really form part of the due diligence of the ministry.
It wouldn't what?
It should form a part of the due diligence of the ministry before certain activities are undertaken with institutions.
Mr. Robinson? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'll defer this one to Mr. Kevin Mullins, Senior Director, Hatchers Fund.
Good afternoon, members.
Afternoon.
Chairman, responding to the specific question that was asked about the compliance of Western Hospitality, we did identify a debt of $183,000. This was based on the filings of the monthly SO1 and the annual SO2, which we use to determine the liability. This liability...
Can you just explain to the committee what is SO1 and SO2?
Oh, sorry. That is a statutory filing to the tax authorities that indicates the number of staff that you have employed and what you pay to them. So the SO1 is on the monthly basis, and the SO2 would be the annual return that is done at the end of the year. When we assess the records, we would have determined that the entity had 3 employees based on the filings. The entity would have indicated that they carry out instructional delivery. However, these were done through contractual arrangements, and in terms of contractual arrangements, you have contract for service and contract of service. These sort of contractual arrangements, the other individuals with the entity would have engaged, would have fallen outside of that remit in terms of the contribution, because they'd be required to file their own statutories. So we would have been based on the actual filing, the SO1 and the SO2. We determined the liability of $183,000 for 2011, January to April 2017, and this amount was settled on June 28, 2019. As it presently is, the entity, based on our analysis on the Revenue Administration Information System, the company would have further outstanding amounts. We have not yet done a follow-up audit of that subsequent period.
Yeah, and where I found this answer a bit peculiar is that any entity that is really getting into business with government needs a TCC to operate. And an entity that is benefiting year after year, starting with the CAP program, is outstanding tax amount to the government itself. And if they are filing that they only have 3 employees and paying only $183,000 in taxes, that is what was owed from the 3%. But then seeing the amounts that is earning from these programs and still owing amounts up to June 2021. So the heart who finances this program through the Ministry of Education, don't see something wrong with that?
Before you answer, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mullins, sorry. It says here in the report, I think is the one you're referring to here, it says for the period 2011 to 2017, the taxable wage bill is $6 million. So for the 6 years, it's $6 million. 11 to 17, 6 years. So it's roughly about $1 million per year is the wage bill. That is my rough calculation. That's what it says. That the Western Hospitality Institution would have paid a taxable wage bill of just over $1 million per year. That is the tax-free. So all the persons that they employ is
Yeah, they're saying that everybody else is contractual.
No, but fine, I gather that. But the person who they employed are only persons that earn roughly $1 million per year.
Yes, that determination, member, would be based on the information that was received and the information that was filed. This is what was filed. I made a distinction earlier about the contract for service and contract of service. They indicated that they would have had other persons who would do work for them, but it's on a contractual basis. If it's on a contractual basis, it would not attract the contribution.
So let me go back to my original question. When these institutions, or especially the private institutions, are being contracted to provide these services on behalf of the government of Jamaica, are they required to supply TCCs just like any other company that is doing business with the government of Jamaica?
All right. For HART, Chairman, when we are engaging entities, we require that there's compliance with 3% when we are making payments directly to an entity. So we require that there's conformance with our requirements.
So how is it then that this institution is able to still operate using taxpayers' funds without anything happening to them? I mean, you know, because by your report, they are still delinquent.
But Mr. Chair, with your permission, so with all due respect, the question I heard you ask was, is the entities required, are the entities required to have a TCC? You answered to say they comply with the 3%, but that wasn't the question he asked.
Yes, sir. We do require, there are different types of engagements, some by tender. Engagements require for us that the entities be up to date with their hard 3% contributions. This entity, in terms of engagement, I'm not clear that we have engaged Western Hospitality directly through HART.
No, but Mr. Mullins, try to keep it simpler for me. The question is, the chairman asked, do you require companies to have a TCC to be engaged formally in providing government service? Is that a yes or no?
Yes, that's a yes.
Okay, has this company supplied the TCC so required?
Well, let me then go to the ministry. But also, how is it then that the Ministry of Education, because in this instance, it's the Ministry of Education that has engaged Western Hospitality. So does the Ministry of Education then do its due diligence to ensure that these entities are tax compliant?
But Chairman, please, with all due respect, yes, the HART falls under the Ministry of Education.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. Well, it falls under some OPM at the time.
No, it still is.
Still is. But functionally, it is the established entity that will be required to ensure compliance with the ministry policy positions. Whether it's the OPM, Ministry of Education, or any other ministry, the central ministry have an oversight responsibility to make sure that the entity complies. So HART being the operational entity who is to ensure that the policy requirements are complied with. Hence I ask the question of Mr. Mullins, as an operational entity, that being HART, did you comply with the TCC requirement in respect of the company being asked yes or no? That is as simple as that.
We do comply with all necessary requirements. I'm not aware that we have directly engaged Western Hospitality, because we provide a subvention to the Ministry
of Education,
who then engages.
So it's the Ministry of Education that did the engagement.
Yes, correct.
And you just provide the funding.
Which is
pretty clear.
No, which is why I'm asking the ministry.
Okay. No, I'm on the same page. Thank you. I'm clear now.
Which is why I'm asking, because the heart gives the ministry as appropriations in aid too. So the question is really to the PS.
Right. So, Chairman, at this time, our requirement for institutions that are engaged in training, the requirement is not for them to provide a tax compliance certificate. We ensure that they are registered with the independent schools, which is the unit in the ministry that registers private institutions. And there are basic documents that are requested. I can provide the outline of those documents, but we have never required that they have a tax compliance certificate for them to be in training. For services, that's a different matter, but for them to be in partnership where they are training our students, we have really not requested of them to have a tax compliance certificate.
Chairman, I have an outstanding question I'd ask of the PS regarding, for ease of reference, costs, COS.
No, but before you go to cost, because I think that in itself, be training or not, in this instance, Western Hospitality over the period has earned, because they would not be in this business if there was not an earning to the institution itself, over $200 million. And that is taxpayers' money, where employers and employees paying over an amount to the heart, NTA, that is now given to the ministry as an appropriations in aid to fund these programs. Right? So it is not free money. You are paying for a service, which is training. So whichever way you want to twist it, it is a service that they are providing on behalf of the ministry. And these entities, or this one in question that we have in front of us, is delinquent in its obligation to the same agency that is providing the funding for them to have an earning.
Why were they exempted from the CCC?
Yeah? So wouldn't you see something wrong then in the policy, that if a government agency or entity or ministry or department engaging an institution in the matter of training using taxpayers' money, that in itself isn't a breach? Yeah?
Well, Chairman, I will certainly have a look at all the institutions, because Western Hospitality is just one of many of the private institutions.
That's why I started out by private, but that is the one that's in this report.
We will have a look at it, sir, and I'll discuss it with my policy persons and my minister. And going forward, if there's a requirement for the tax compliance certificate for institutions that are in training with partnership with the ministry, then we will have to require them to do so. But currently, with the number of institutions, maybe over 150 of them, that we have partnership with, we have never really requested that they have a tax compliance certificate as one of the requirements.
Just like any small and medium-sized enterprise who needs a TCC to do business with government, and I believe firmly, and I'm sure my members feel firmly, that once they are benefiting from taxpayers' resources, then any institution, be it training or not, ought to pay their fair share also if they're going to be receiving monies from the government, like any other institution.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm kind of surprised that, the ministry is procuring services from private entity without, tax compliance certificate.
A TCC.
But I would, tax compliance certificate. But I would advise the PS to really look at it, because I know under the government procurement guidelines, I think if you look at it, it would suggest that once you're engaged in the services of any private company, then it is likely that they provide a tax compliance certificate. So I'm advising that you look at it, because it really is a part of the.
Well, the entity would have received $64 million.
But Chair,
in 2019-2020, and the report is saying that the entity is delinquent for the 2019-2020.
But Chair, maybe we should ask the procurement method that was used to engage the services of the private entities.
No, well, any method under the procurement guideline.
That's what I'm bringing back to.
I don't think there's any stipulation as it relates to the company being required to provide
I would urge Minister,
yes, I would urge PS to look at it and see.
And what is the reason behind not requiring? Because it is a service that you're requiring from these institutions.
So you would
this or any other institution. Why would they would not need a TCC to provide a service on behalf of the government of Jamaica?
I'll do some research, Chairman. As far as I can remember, the independent, once they are registered with the Independent Schools Association of the ministry, not the association of the ministry, the independent schools, then that is the check and balance that we do to engage in partnership. But I will pull the documentation, because I think this entity ensure that they are fully registered business. But as to whether they have an up-to-date tax compliance certificate, it's not something that I would have checked year after year. So they would have registered with independent schools for them to be considered, but I really would not have checked. My officer is just advising that training and education is excluded from the guidelines, but as you have said, sir, I take the point, and I will do the verification, and if it is necessary to have it included in the registration process for the private schools, then we will do so. But I'm just telling you as it is. I'll go back, I'll check the procurement rules. Mrs. Banton is saying that training and education is excluded. But I will check the procurement rules, and based on the discussion, if it is necessary going forward, we'll do so.
These would be registered entities, registered companies.
So the independent schools check to make sure that they are legally registered business with the registrar of companies. So that is the cue I take. So the registrar has to provide with the list of institutions and indicate that they are duly registered before we go into business. And Chairman, we are talking about institutions that have been with the ministry from maybe as far back as 2,000 training students. So these private institutions are only a subset of the numbers.
Now, if it is that they are exempt from certain taxes, then that's one thing. But in this instance, there is a delinquency that is on the books of the Heart Trust NTA.
So, Chairman, that's what I'm saying. Perhaps as I listen, I perhaps now have to take this suggestion forward and have a further extension to what the requirement will be going forward.
Okay.
Chair, one last question. Well, you had asked a question before, but I don't recall an answer being provided in relation to the architects of the COS program. Who are the persons involved?
Yes. Okay. Right.
Because, Chair, that was a question I was coming to. Because there is such a
we don't have much time left, but
crossover. In 2019, in 2018, 2019, when you extract out the expenses for accommodation, occupational expenses, marketing, and so on, and look at the tuition allocation, Western Hospitality Institute had over 53% of the tuition allocation against institutions like, there are 19 institutions for that year. 19.
Yes.
And out of that 19, Western Hospitality Institute had over 53% of the allocation. The other 47 split up with the other 18 institutions, including long-established institutions like Monique College, Excelsior Community College, GC Foster, Shortwood Community College, IUC, Case, Knox College, Montego Bay Community College, NCU, Brownstone Community College, Micro College, all of those long-established institutions. Put it bluntly, Madam PS, you know when I talk about insider trading? One institution.
Mr. Chair.
And I'm saying it without retraction.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on.
No.
I would like to hear.
Let us look at it from a different point of view. Remember now that those institutions that you named, the well-established institutions, I don't think they would have the capacity in terms of physical plant to accommodate, because they would have been accommodating people in the regular system, so they might not have the space as that institution.
Right. Okay,
these could be some of the reasons why you don't have that take up.
But you asked an original question, member, which we have not yet gotten an answer. So before we even move further, so that we can.
Let me remind the question. You mentioned about a structure piece of COS coming together of a committee of persons. Committee is not an abstract entity. They are a set of persons. How many persons made up that committee of COS? Who are those persons? That's question 2. Question 3. Has any of those persons in COS been associated with Western Hospitality Institute? And lastly, I would say that the question before that is influenced by the fact that you have a crossover of principles of personnel between West Indies COS and West Indies Hospitality Institute, as per April 9th report in the Gleaner earlier on this year. So I'd like you to address those 3 specific questions.
Okay, so Chairman, I'm trying to make sure that I'm answering what is being asked. The Center of Occupational Studies was a unit in the ministry with about 6 staff members, a director, and persons responsible for different activities. The first director was seconded from Hart to support the program. The second director was also was not recruited from Hart, but had retired, I believe, from Hart, and based on his technical expertise, he was engaged to continue the program. Then in 2019, we had a director who went through the process in terms of being interviewed, and he served 6 months, and his contract was not renewed. He was from Western Hospitality.
No, but just before you go to that.
What year was that?
The committee of 6.
No, it's not the committee, sir. These are members who were employed by the ministry. The Joint Committee on Tertiary Education is an entirely different body, which is made up of tertiary institution presidents that operated as an advocacy body, which had a partnership with the ministry, but the ministry was not directly responsible for its operations.
No, what I'm trying to get clear on, Madam Pierce, the Center for Occupational Studies, you said was made up of a committee.
No, sir. These are persons who were employed to the ministry. So the joint committee is different. It's a unit in because the Center of Occupational Studies was a unit. In the ministry.
So it was a unit, and that unit was headed by a director.
Right. Yes, sir.
And the director was out of the ministry.
So I had mentioned to you that the first director was seconded from
the ministry.
Hart.
From Hart.
Right.
Okay.
The second director was it was a retiree. We got permission.
Before you go to the second director,
okay.
In its initial stages, when it was comprised with a director seconded from Hart, who were the other persons who made up that the center?
Okay. At the time,
yes,
we had that one director, and there were about 4 other members who were employed at the time.
Who were employed where?
To the ministry.
To the ministry?
Yes, sir.
No, hold on.
To the ministry.
To the unit or
to the unit?
To the unit.
They were employed to the unit?
Yeah.
They were fully employed?
As far back as I can remember, sir.
Who are those 4 persons?
Okay, so I don't want to run the risk of specifically say who those 4 persons are. I have the list of members who were all persons who were employed and their start date and end dates and terms of engagement that I could provide.
Let that just come in the report.
Yes. We would like to see that.
Yes.
Have you had any case where anybody leave from COS go to, well, let me you have persons leaving COS going to I'm reflecting on this question.
Well, she said that there was one person who was employed as director who stayed for 6 months, who is from Western Hospitality.
Right, yes, I said that.
So she said
from
that.
Western Hospitality to COS?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
That particular recruitment, we were in the process of seeking in 2019 because I think there was an assumption that was made that the position was approved through the Ministry of Finance. When we checked the records, we realized that it was not approved. And so we had a set of interviews with our representatives from different tertiary institutions. Of course, it went through the HR of the ministry and not directly through the unit.
And not directly through the unit?
Not directly through the unit. It went through the HR process of the ministry.
Sorry, before you move on, the HR process. What does that, was it advertised when you say go through the HR process?
So it was not advertised, sir, because we had not yet gotten approval from the ministry for this position to be activated. And so we had the interviews based on resumes that would have been available in HR, and we engaged for 6 months until we got approval from the Ministry of Finance for the position of director.
So until you got the approval from the ministry, you were taking interviews from persons existing in the ministry. Those interviews that you were doing, those were from persons within the ministry?
Those were actually pulled from resumes that were available in the HR unit. And I believe members...
No, please.
Okay.
They said resumes, person who applied for jobs never got them.
Right, yes.
So that was a more selective interview, because if I applied for a job and I never get it, you have my resume.
Open back to the general public.
Exactly. So it would be, if you just use the resumes that you have from previous applications or invitations, it becomes a selective process.
So Chairman, what had happened at the time, sir, the position was not duly classified and approved by the Ministry of Finance.
I know that.
And I am just saying, I took the decision in 2019 for us to interview from the pool and for us to have someone selected. Unfortunately, well, I don't know if I should say unfortunately, at the end of the 6 months period, we did not, the contract ended. We had gotten the approval from Ministry of Finance, and we had started to take, the position was actually advertised at that time.
I will remember before, because we're not going to be able to finish that deliberations. So since there's some information on that exact question that the PS will furnish us in that list, I would then say that you just give us a background then in the employment process and processes,
Yes, sir.
so that we can get a better understanding, so that when we resume this sitting, then we can then delve into it, because at least we'll have more information with the names and everything that
I take your point, Chairman, and I will abide by your directives.
I appreciate.
But I must tell you, it is very disconcerting.
I know.
When you look at the non-compliance with that particular entity, and when I look, I made some rough calculation based upon the allocation. In 2016, in 2018, 2019, 53% of the tuition allocation to that institution.
When we get the follow-up.
In 2019, 2020, 22% going into COVID, and 19% thereafter. It dominates the allocation of this tuition. So that raises more than a high.
So you can answer the questions when the
Okay.
I just want to ask, NCT vet, is it under the structure of the Ministry of Education?
Not as yet, sir. It was in the assignment of subjects, the last assignment of subjects, but we are in the process of just going through the activities that will ensure the transition from her to the ministry.
But, well, I mean, so it is basically in La La Land, because the report from HART is that the National Council on Technical and Vocational Education and Training are not included on the new organizational structure, as that entity was reassigned to the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information in 2018, and we're in 2021, and you are saying that it is not yet under your structure. HART is saying is that it's not under their structure, and an important institution such as NCT vet, then who owns that child?
So, Chairman, there are a series of processes that we have to go through when you are moving one entity from one body to the other. We are almost at the end. It has really taken a lot of time, because you're talking about the legal requirements and other requirements to make sure that the staff is also comfortable.
So who oversees the entity now?
So Wayne and Mrs. Prince can answer that question, sir. We are just going through the transition for it to be fully assigned to us.
I would like to know who oversees this entity right
Mr. Chairman, this has been a rather gray area, but we are guided by the assignment of subjects published in September of 2018, which showed that the NCT vet falls under the ambit of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. And as far as I'm aware, the HART NSTA Trust pays salaries, but in terms of directly overseeing their operations, I'm not aware that that is robustly done by the HART NSTA Trust. And it is something that the OPM is very concerned about, because we are very serious about governance, and if it is that an entity is under our portfolio, then we are very clear in terms of how it is that we will proceed to monitor, collaborate with that entity. So as far as we are aware, the Ministry of Education, and this is something clearly we have to discuss with P.S. Sewell and team, P.S. McLean and her team, and P.S. Sewell from the OPM, in terms of how we are going to treat with it. I'm aware also that the Attorney General's Chambers has provided preliminary comments on a draft cabinet submission. While I can't share the contents therein, it is something also that the Ministry of Education has been championing, and we will give the necessary support if and when required. But as it stands now, this is not something that falls under the rubric of the OPM directly.
Mr. Chairman, that is very disheartening, Mr. Roberts.
To say the least.
To say the least. 3 years. You have a portfolio transfer from 2018 to now 2021, the middle of 2021. And between both ministries and whatever other interceding entity like the Attorney General's chamber, 3 years. This is why you end up with many governance breaches, because you don't have the thing properly laid in any entity to exercise statutory oversight responsibility. So the chairman's description of it being in la land is very apt. And then we see the kinds of transactions. We don't get to go to those items yet. We have to leave that for the next sitting. You have those kinds of issues of coming out of heart with those contracts and the whole issue or question of conflict of interest. Who is overseeing the shop? Who has governance responsibility?
So if then it is neither with either entity and the reclassification of employees, then the employees at NCTVET would not benefit at all from any reclassification.
Chair, they're not a part of the structure, this one that we're currently going through right now, and so they would not be benefiting. But retroactively, based on when the implementation started, what is due to them, they would have gotten it. But this particular department has been assigned to the Ministry of Education and Youth. It's really not under Office of the Prime Minister now.
So what has delayed the assuming NCTVET into the Ministry of Education?
Chairman, I don't know if I should say that there is a delay. It has been a long process. The staff members are employed to HEART. I think it may be about over 35 or more of them. The HEART Act was changed within the period. In the interrogation of the Act, there are some staff members who are under the current NCTVET who would still be required through HEART, and there may be others who, based on the component to do with register and accreditation of institutions, that team that support that component would be coming to the ministry.
Yeah, but with all due respect, Jamaica Lifelong for Learning was under which ministry?
It was under Education, sir.
And National Youth Service was under which ministry?
Yes, and those two went
and
under
those
HEART.
two went to HEART. And all of that was completed in 2020. Right? So what is taking it? What is the problem? There must be a delay or a problem.
So as
because
I indicate,
within government, Madam Pierce.
There's not a delay,
Madam
Chairman.
Pierce, hold on, man. Within government itself, there have always been reassignment of agencies and departments under government. What is different about this one that it is taking so long for the reassignment? And the reason why I'm emphasizing on this one, because this is the agency that does the certification on behalf of HEART and the Ministry of Education for these same programs under the Center of Occupational Studies. So I can't see why it is that it is taking this period of time for you to do the transfer of that entity into the Ministry of Education. If you don't want it, tell them, say, you know what, I can't keep it. But it cannot be that an entity like that is neither under the jurisdiction of HEART or the Ministry of Education, and it is just there, just floating.
So, Chairman, we are almost at the end of the process to go to
well, the process has taken too long, Madam Pierce.
Approval. And when you are shifting an entity from a statutory body to the central ministry, there are some specifics that we really have to observe. And we have diligently gone through, gotten all the opinions from the Attorney General Chambers and all the required opinion and no objection that we require. And we expect that this will be completed in very short order, sir.
Mr. Robinson, it's not looking good on the OPM either. This needs to happen quickly.
Yeah, so we have already committed to working with HEART to work with education to ensure that the transition is seamless once the submission has been lodged before Cabinet and approved.
Maybe there's a good reason why it is taking so long, Good reason probably shouldn't go there. Because in my own mind, I can't fathom how the premier skills training entity in the country heart. You spoke, Mr. Robertson, so eloquently about heart and its reputation, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But one other critical training activity is moved out of the premier training, skills training.
The certification. They deal with the certification. That's their main purpose.
Yeah, but Chair, that should not have been
and the
at
development
heart in
of
the
the
first
programs.
place. It really shouldn't have resided with heart in the first place.
Agreed.
Because it really requires some level of independence.
Yeah.
So
Well, fine,
I would
I can
imagine
take
that the
that.
transfer should have been a matter of urgency.
Urgency, which is the point we're making, should not take this period of time, despite the legal
I take the point.
opinions and everything. It should not have taken that long.
But one last thing I want to say, Mr. Roberts, just a little thing I pick up on the ground. What is your process of validation or revalidation of your training programs? And I'll tell you why I ask you. I engage a cabinet man and I quarrel with him when it takes so long to deliver the work. Why him don't get more workers? And what about our hard trainees? And what him tell me about the quality of the persons that him get that come supposedly trained by heart. I was a bit embarrassed because I'm a big ambassador promoting heart and encouraging persons to go and get certified on the heart. So, I said, let me use the opportunity to ask you because that's the complaint I've been getting by, no, it's not scientific, let me put that.
But Mr. Robinson,
right? That's why I asked
Mr. Robinson, I'm going to ask you to hold the answer until we come back at the next sitting.
Okay,
because we're
Mr.
22 minutes over the time. So I'll allow the member to ask the question again when you come back for the sitting. So, Madam Pierce, Madam... hear me, Madam. Mr. Robinson. Robertson, sorry. Chief Technical Director in the Office of the Prime Minister. So, yeah. Yes, let me thank you both, and all the members that are here for appearing here today at the PAAC. As you would see that we have not delved into even a report from heart. So we're going to be asking some additional information from the Ministry of Education on questions that members have. And then we will, from the clerk's office, notify to set a date for you to come back and appear before the PAAC. Just to say, enjoy the rest of the summer. As we are on summer break, that doesn't mean that we're not working. As MPs don't get break.
Yes, it's a bit disappointed that we're going to be on break and she can't come back before then.
All right, so let me thank you and keep safe and COVID-free. All right, you're welcome. All right, members, item 8, any other business? As there are no other business, members.
So moved, Chair.
Enjoy your summer break as best as you can and keep safe. All right, meeting adjourned.